Something explosive has just slipped into the public domain, something no one expected, least of all the UK government. A classified move by Tom Hardy, kept hidden until 1 minute ago, has suddenly leaked. And now the entire country is spiralling into shock, confusion and outright fury. What did Hardy do? Why is Starmer's team scrambling? And how did a Hollywood icon end up at the centre of a political firestorm that threatens to flip Westminster upside down? Stay close, because what you're about to hear is not the sanitised version. This is the raw, unfiltered truth. The leak didn't come quietly. It tore through social media like a lightning strike. Fast, violent and impossible to ignore. One moment the timeline was calm, predictable, and the next chaos erupted. A single encrypted file shared by an anonymous insider revealed what appeared to be a covert strategy move made by Tom Hardy himself. One directed straight at Sir Keir Starmer's leadership circle. At first, people thought it was a joke. Why would Hardy, a global superstar, known for his intensity on screen but privacy in real life, insert himself into the ruthless world of UK politics? But the document felt too sharp, too detailed, too urgent to dismiss. It named advisors, it mapped out weaknesses, and it hinted at something far more deliberate, a quiet, calculated attempt to challenge the direction the country was heading under Starmer's watch. Within minutes, hashtags exploded, commentators went wild, journalists scrambled to verify what they could, while the public split into two electrified sides. Those who believed Hardy was stepping in as a voice the people desperately needed, and those who saw this as an unprecedented breach of political boundaries. But the real shock wasn't the leak itself, it was the timing. The file was sent out precisely as Westminster was preparing for one of its most sensitive policy announcements, one Starmer's team had been guarding tightly for weeks. The leak hit like a hammer, cracking open vulnerabilities his opponents could exploit instantly. People began asking the same question: how long had Hardy been planning this? Because the move didn't feel impulsive. It felt strategic. It felt rehearsed, almost like Hardy wasn't stepping into the chaos, but stepping through it with purpose. Sources close to the situation began whispering that Hardy had been quietly meeting with influential figures, former ministers, ex-advisors, grassroots organisers, far from cameras, far from the public eye. These weren't friendly celebrity meetups, these were serious conversations, deep political talk, the kind that shapes direction, the kind that disrupts comfort zones, the kind that makes powerful people nervous. And now with one leak, that entire operation, whatever it truly was, has been thrust into the spotlight. Starmer's team, blindsided and caught off balance, has reportedly gone into emergency mode. Internal messages, hastily written and panicked, reveal a leadership desperate to contain the damage. They're trying to understand who leaked it, how it slipped through security, and most importantly, what Hardy's endgame really is. Because this wasn't an accident, this wasn't a celebrity rant or a careless comment, this was a move, a deliberate step, and the UK can feel it. The air is charged, the conversations are heated, and the pressure is building. Something bigger is coming, something Hardy clearly expected and maybe even planned for. And now, as reactions explode across the nation, one thing has become painfully clear: Tom Hardy isn't just in the story anymore, he's driving it. As the dust from the initial leak settled, if you could even call it settling, the situation took an even stranger turn. What people first assumed was a one-off document began to look more like the first piece of a larger puzzle. Analysts noticed details inside the leaked file that didn't feel random, references to upcoming parliamentary moves, coded mentions of individuals close to Starmer, and hints at conversations that, according to insiders, only a handful of senior figures should have known about. This wasn't just a message, it was a warning shot, and if Hardy was behind it, he wasn't firing blindly. Within hours, the political sphere was buzzing with theories. Some claimed Hardie had aligned himself with a growing group of disillusioned insiders, individuals who believed Starmer's leadership was drifting away from the promises that once carried him to power. Others insisted Hardie was acting alone, driven by frustration at watching the country slide deeper into division and uncertainty. But the most chilling theory, the one that struck fear and into the heart of Westminster, was that Hardie had access to people, access to conversations, and access to information no outsider should possess. That's when a secondary leak emerged. Not a document this time, but a voice. A short, grainy audio clip posted anonymously containing a conversation between senior advisors speculating about how long Hardie had been monitoring them. The tone was tense. The words cautious, almost paranoid. They spoke about unexpected visitors at closed-door meetings. Sudden questions from journalists that match conversations held in private rooms. And a growing sense that something or someone was listening. So the UK reacted instantly. People were stunned. A Hollywood actor navigating political corridors was already shocking enough, but the implication that he had managed to outmaneuver Starmer's inner circle felt surreal. Social media erupted into a frenzy of disbelief, admiration and anger. Some praised Hardie for stepping into a space where they believed the public's voice had been ignored. Others accused him of overstepping, calling his actions reckless and dangerous. But the loudest voices weren't online. They were behind closed doors in Westminster. Reports began trickling out that Starmer's team had initiated a silent internal investigation, hunting for the source of the leak. Every phone call was double-checked. Every message was scrutinised. Trust inside the building snapped like thin wire, and allies began eyeing each other with quiet suspicion. Yet despite the chaos, the real question haunted everyone. Why Hardie? Why now? Those close to the actor painted a picture of a man who had grown increasingly unsettled by the direction the country was heading. He'd always been vocal about supporting ordinary people, but recently he had been digging deeper, meeting with workers, listening to veterans, speaking with communities who felt abandoned by political promises. It wasn't the work of a celebrity looking for attention. These were the actions of someone gathering information, building connections and preparing. The more the story unfolded, the more it felt like Hardie wasn't acting on impulse at all. He had patience, he had intent, and somewhere between his quiet conversations and the explosive leak, he had discovered something significant enough to put him on a collision course with the Prime Minister himself. Now, as the tension tightens and speculation grows, one thing is becoming unmistakably clear. This wasn't a random clash. This was a calculated confrontation, and Hardie had just made his opening move. As the storm raged in Westminster, the full scale of Tom Hardie's influence started to come into sharper focus. What seemed like a rogue leak now appeared to be part of a larger, more orchestrated effort. It wasn't just a political shot fired across the bow. It was the beginning of something far deeper, more coordinated and more far-reaching than anyone could have predicted. What was becoming clear now was that Hardie wasn't just using his celebrity status as a tool. He had allies, and not just any allies. Inside sources began to reveal that Hardie had been in contact with some of the most disillusioned members of Starmer's own party. Senior figures, long dissatisfied with the party leadership's direction, had apparently been speaking with the actor in private for weeks. Hardie, known for his intense roles on screen, had been playing a quiet game of his own behind the scenes, leveraging his connections and personal charisma to build a shadow coalition. This wasn't just about a celebrity's moment of outrage. This was a calculated strike against a political system that many felt had grown increasingly out of touch. And Hardie, it seemed, was positioning himself as a figurehead for those who were fed up with empty promises, fed up with the spin and the polished sound bites. Hardie was perhaps the perfect person to voice their anger, their frustration, and their desire for real change. Inside Starmer's camp, whispers began to grow louder about strategic moves that had been made without their knowledge. How long had Hardie been positioning himself like this? Was he always planning this? These questions rippled through Starmer's inner circle as they began to piece together the significance of his actions. Some members of Starmer's team were now quietly admitting to journalists that they hadn't fully understood Hardy's potential until it was too late. This revelation shook the foundation of Westminster. A celebrity actor wasn't just creating buzz on social media, he was actively helping shape a political narrative. His voice, amplified by his fame, was quickly becoming a rallying cry for those who felt ignored by the traditional political elite. People outside the Westminster bubble were starting to see Hardy as something more than just an actor. He was becoming a symbol of the ordinary citizen taking a stand against the political establishment. And that was a narrative no one in the government wanted to face. But the deeper the story went, the more it became evident that Hardy had not acted alone. Sources indicated that the actor was in talks with a shadowy group of former party insiders, analysts, and even grassroots activists who were united by a shared goal: breaking the current political system's grip on the country. Together, they had been quietly working to undermine Starmer's leadership in ways that weren't just about leaking documents or stirring up public sentiment. They were actively shaping a political counter-narrative. One name that kept coming up in these conversations was Caroline Lucas, the leader of the Green Party. Though not directly involved with Hardy, she had long been an outspoken critic of the UK's political stagnation. Many believed that Hardy was aligning himself with people like Lucas, those who were just as eager for change but had often been sidelined by the dominant political forces. The fact that Hardy, a man with no official political background, was now finding common ground with established figures in the opposition was a telling sign that something was shifting. As more leaks came out, emails, secret conversations, even handwritten notes, one thing became crystal clear. Hardy wasn't just trying to rattle Starmer's cage, he was trying to disrupt the entire political order. It wasn't just about breaking a story, it was about shaking up the system that had been in place for so long. Meanwhile, though, the UK public was buzzing with confusion and anticipation. In towns and cities across the country, people were torn between two possibilities. One, that Hardy was overstepping his bounds as an actor, using his fame to create unnecessary chaos. Or two, that he had become a voice for the voiceless, a symbol of the growing disillusionment with the way politics had been handled for decades. And as Westminster scrambled to react, Hardy's next move remained shrouded in mystery. What was he preparing for next? What was his true agenda? Was this just the beginning of a political revolution that had nothing to do with traditional party lines? The leaks kept coming, each one more revealing than the last, until the next piece of information dropped like a bombshell. Hardy was reportedly preparing to address the nation. His speech, according to multiple sources, was set to lay out exactly why he had taken such drastic steps. If this was true, it would be the most direct public challenge to Starmer's leadership yet. The question wasn't whether Hardy would go through with it, but whether Starmer could survive it. And just when it seemed like everything was falling apart for the UK's political elite, one simple truth emerged from the chaos. Tom Hardy was not just playing the role of an outsider anymore. He had become a contender. As the UK braced for Hardy's anticipated address, the tension in Westminster reached an almost unbearable boiling point. The leaking of private information, the calculated political moves, the whispered alliances. It all led to this moment. Tom Hardy, the actor who had once been content to remain out of the public's gaze, was now at the epicentre of a political storm. And there was no telling what would happen once he spoke. Reports had emerged that Hardy was preparing a national broadcast, a direct message to the people of the UK, where he would lay out his intentions and reveal the true extent of his involvement in the political upheaval. This wasn't a Hollywood press conference. This wasn't a red carpet appearance. This was the kind of speech that could change the course of British politics forever. And as his speech loomed closer, the questions only deepened. Was Hardy about to formally announce his intention to run for office? Was he positioning himself as an alternative to the current political leaders, a champion of the forgotten and a force for radical change? Or was this simply a calculated warning to Starmer and his allies, telling them that no one, not even the most entrenched political elites, was safe from the people's anger? Across the country, everyone was waiting with bated breath. The speculation was endless. Would Hardy's words stir the masses? Would he become a beacon for those who had grown tired of the status quo? Or would his boldness be his undoing? The leaks continued. New details surfaced every hour, painting a picture of an actor who had become increasingly entrenched in the political machinations of the country. Hardy's quiet meetings with political figures, his carefully constructed alliances with grassroots movements. This was no longer about a celebrity voicing his opinion. This was about strategy, and every move was calculated. Sources inside Starmer's team were frantic. There was talk of emergency strategy sessions, calls for action from their highest ranks, and a growing realisation that they were dealing with something far beyond what they had ever anticipated. Hardy's calculated approach was catching them off guard, and for the first time, the political establishment was beginning to feel as if they had lost control of the narrative, and that was a dangerous position to be in. But Hardy wasn't just leveraging leaks or stirring controversy. He was amplifying voices that had long been ignored. People from the streets, workers from all over the country, even former party members who felt betrayed, they were all looking to Hardy to provide them with the platform they never had. He was offering more than just a critique of the current government. He was offering something far more radical, an alternative vision for the country, one that didn't follow the well-worn paths of party politics. As the day of the speech drew near, the UK's political commentators were torn. Was this just a fleeting moment of celebrity-driven madness, or was Hardy truly prepared to shake the very foundations of the political establishment? Could he transcend the political game and offer the British people something new, something revolutionary? Then the announcement came. Hardy was set to address the nation in just hours. The broadcast would be live, raw and unfiltered. There would be no scripts, no talking points, just Hardy alone in front of a camera speaking directly to the people. His message was expected to cover everything from his frustration with the current leadership to his own personal vision for the country. And with every second that passed, the anticipation grew more unbearable. The entire nation held its breath. The political elite, those who had built their careers in the safety of backroom deals and polished speeches, had to face the reality that a man with no political office, no official backing, and no fear had just broken into their world. Tom Hardy was no longer just an actor. He was a force they could not ignore. And then it happened. The broadcast began. Hardy stood there, looking directly into the camera with the kind of intensity that had made him a star in Hollywood. His eyes were sharp, unwavering, as if he knew exactly what he was about to say could change everything. The nation waited, and as the seconds ticked by, his words came crashing through the airwaves. Hardy didn't mince words. He didn't sugarcoat the truth. He spoke with the urgency of someone who had seen enough, who had lived through the system and realised the time for change had arrived. "I'm not here to play your game," he began, his voice steady. "I'm not here to follow your rules. The people of this country are tired. They're tired of the lies, tired of the empty promises, and I've seen it, the real cost of your decisions. But this isn't about me, it's about us, every single one of us who's been pushed aside while you play your games in Westminster." His message was clear. The UK's political system, he argued, was broken. And it wasn't enough to just complain about it. Change wasn't going to come from the inside, it would come from the outside. From people like him, from people who were willing to step up and take the reins. In that moment, it wasn't just Hardy speaking, it was the voice of millions who had felt unheard, unrepresented and ignored for far too long. His words weren't just a challenge to Starmer, they were a call to action for everyone who had ever felt disconnected from the political process. The speech ended. The silence that followed was deafening. And as the country digested what they had just witnessed, one thing was undeniable. Tom Hardy had changed the game. He had stepped into the fray with a clarity and purpose that no one had seen coming.